What's up, it's your boy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, on why people keep believing the lies of the opposition. Yeah, so this video you can decide yourself who you want your boy to be. I'm not taking a political side. So, I am gonna be honest. I didn't really know how to title this video, or how to concise the central theme of this video into a sentence, so I'm just going to explain the premise. When people talk to people they are politically opposed to, they just take their talking point and turn them around, instead of critically looking at what they are saying. I will try to explain this through a very simple example. You have two people talking who are politically opposed to one another. Person 1 says, Karachi is a horrible city with it being the capital of Pakistan and all that. And then person 2, who disagrees with person 1 politically, says, no, being the capital is what makes Karachi great. The problem with this exchange is that person 2 obviously just reacted to person 1's statement with the goal of being contradictory and to further a political agenda that has nothing to do with the actual subject. Person 2 doesn't really know anything about the subject and just want to further their political opposition to person 1. How can you know this? Well, Karachi isn't the capital of Pakistan. Islamabad is. This is a very simple example of person 2 believing the lies of the opposition to further their own political agenda and goals, instead of pursuing reality and the truth. Because let's be clear, person 1 was either lying or also didn't know what they were talking about. So in this video I'm going to give 3 real life examples to show you what I mean, whilst very badly pretending to be the 2 most sane women in US politics. So the first real-time example is about the Andrew Tate trial. When Andrew Tate got arrested and then charged, the entire mainstream media was pretty happy about it all. A lot of praise got directed at the Romanian authorities, judiciary system and Romania in general for the great systems they are and for bringing Andrew Tate to justice. Therefore this trial will be completely fair. Because we all know that Romania is a great country. And you know who agrees? Andrew Tate. He loved Romania for its traditional values and safety.
In Bucharest, the capital city, is extremely safe.
Really?
It's extremely safe.
At least before he got arrested. Okay, so what do I mean by all this? Both the pro and anti-Tate side have created an image of Romania which is simply not accurate, which may influence how everyone looks at a trial. I think the idea that Andrew Tate is going to get a fair trial is insane if you look at the accurate state of Romania. So let me ask you a question. What do you think about when you think Romanian women? As an American, you might think of the protest sisters, the 2 good-looking young women who love chess. Well, in Europe, Romanian women are sadly found more behind a window than a chessboard. It is very difficult to find exact numbers, but the most reliable data estimates that around 12 to 44% of all prostitutes found in Europe are Romanian. And all sources agree that Romanian is the most common nationality for prostitutes to have in Europe. And most of this happens through human trafficking, including human trafficking of children. A good way to see this horrible reality reflected in the numbers is that in 1 year over 5,000 kids went missing in Romania. All of this is for a country which only has a population of 19.2 million people. So much for traditional values and safety. Romania is also the 3rd most corrupt country in the EU and also doesn't do great on the racism front. This all makes Romania not a good country to live, which is why Romania has the 3rd lowest migration rate in the EU and the 27th lowest in the world, which means Romanians want to leave their country more than Haitians. And if you know how things are in Haiti, this will tell you how bad things are in Romania. A good video about the experience of a Romanian in Romania is this video by Ludi, one of my favorite EU4 YouTubers. I will link it in the description. Now, having heard all that, do you really think Andrew Tate is going to get a fair trial? No matter the outcome, whether Tate gets found guilty or innocent, that trial is not going to be fair. Whether it is because of Tate's financial and business resources, or because of the racism, or because of media attention, or maybe because the Romanian elite really like him or want him gone, who gives a fuck? No matter the outcome, no matter the reason, the likelihood of him getting a fair trial, in my opinion, is pretty fucking low. Everyone, both the pro and anti-Tate side, just seem to ignore this, because it doesn't fit their narrative. The pro-Tate side just wants to whine about the Matrix and Western values, while the anti-side just wants to whine about toxic masculinity, how Tate sets a bad example for young men. Nobody really cares about what this entire trial is supposed to be about, protecting women from human trafficking. Another example is how both Bernie Sanders and Ben Shapiro misrepresent the Nordic countries. So what I mean is that Bernie Sanders constantly says how the Scandinavian countries and Finland are democratic socialists, and that he wants to implement democratic socialism just like them. According to Bernie, he's basically just like them.
Now, he wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. That's right. And what's wrong with that?
So just like him, they like things like high corporate taxes, governmental healthcare, a high minimum wage, and are anti-military. Now conservatives obviously don't like this whole socialism thingy, and all the things Bernie Sanders wants. So if these Scandinavians and Finns are just like him, well, you can just criticize them like you would Bernie Sanders. So the Nordic countries must have no military, and seeing as America has a big military which protects freedom,
America, fuck yeah, coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah, America, fuck yeah, freedom is the only way, yeah, terrorists, your game is through, 'cause now you have to answer to America, fuck yeah, so lick my blood and suck on my bone.
the US must take care of all their military concerns. This also combines well with the fact that NATO is taking advantage of the United States, as all of us good conservatives know, which means that the only way the Nordic countries can keep this whole socialism up is because the US basically pays their defense bill, which is exactly the argument Ben Shapiro makes.
This philosophy works in Vermont and it works in Norway, but it only works for a temporary period of time because Vermont doesn't have its own defense budget, and really neither does Norway, right? We've been paying for the Nordic countries' defense budgets for a long time.
Now, even though Denmark's military is abysmal, Norway is actually quite impressive. It still has conscription and boasts a pretty decent score on the military power index, coming in as the 11th highest in NATO. So as you can see, Norway foots its own defense bill just fine. And then there are still Finland and Sweden. So first of all, before I start this segment, both these countries weren't in NATO when Ben Shapiro made those statements, so the US footing their defense bill argument was even less valid with them. But maybe they're just some pacifist pussies who aren't prepared to fight, eh? So let's look at Sweden. Sweden actually has one of the most advanced military industrial complexes in Europe and therefore in the world. The Swedes have such highly advanced military technology it even impresses the Pentagon. So even though the Swedish army is quite small, their military industrial complex is very advanced and quite big. Because they produce such high quality military equipment, everyone wants it, and they definitely do sell it to everyone. Sweden is actually the third or fourth, depending on the source, highest arms exporter per capita in the world. So not exactly a bunch of pacifist pussies. And then there are the Finns. Now, how do I explain the Finns? So yeah, here are some fun facts about the Finnish military. Finland has enough nuclear bomb shelter capacity for 3.6 million people. There are only 4.5 million people in Finland, for your information. Now you might think with this small of a population they might have a small military force. And even though this is true in peacetime when they only have a military of about 30,250 people, the moment a war starts they can ramp this number up to an army of 331,000 people. This is because of the intensive and extensive conscription that takes place in Finland. On top of this, Finland also has another 870,000 reservists who can join the military with a little bit of refresher training. Mix this with some great military equipment designed to stop anyone fucking with Finland, and, well, their track record, look at all those dead Russians, Ukraine would be proud. Finland is perfectly capable to take care of themselves and isn't some hippy-dippy John Lennon pacifist nation that thinks we should all just chill. So now that I've proved that Ben Shapiro is wrong, this means I think Bernie Sanders is actually right and democratic socialism can work, right? Well, let's look at the policies that Bernie Sanders claims are needed to make democratic socialism work in the US. So he wants a $17 an hour minimum wage, extremely high income taxes, sometimes even suggesting up to 90% for the top 1%, higher state taxes, up to 65%, high corporate tax up to 35%, and is a big proponent of a single payer national healthcare system. So how do the Nordic countries compare to these ideas? Well, so first of all, there is not a single country in Europe where the minimum wage is $17. And did you know there are actually some countries in Europe who don't have a minimum wage at all. Wonder which ones those are? Yeah, all of the Nordic countries don't have a minimum wage. On the topic of taxes, Finland has the highest tax of all the Nordic countries, with the maximum being 65.95%. This includes pension payments and all that. Nowhere near Sanders' proposed 90%, and actually not that far off compared to what California's richest pay, with their 12.3% state income tax on top of the 37% federal income tax, making a total of 49.3%, only 7.65% off Finland's 65.95% income tax. So yeah, it's actually quite comparable with California. Then let's move on to the estate or inheritance tax. Again, as you can see on this map, not a single one of the Nordic countries have an estate tax of 65%. Norway and Sweden don't even have an estate tax. And then last but not least, on the tax front, here is every single Nordic country's corporate tax rate. So yeah, again, nowhere near Bernie's 35%. And then there's healthcare. So first of all, Bernie Sanders wants a single-payer national health care service. This is not what Denmark, Finland, Sweden and Norway have. And here I want to say something in general about how Americans look at healthcare. There are gigantic differences in how you implement universal healthcare between countries. And again, this is something both sides just don't talk about. Both Ben Shapiro and Bernie Sanders basically just take the easiest to understand system, the Canadian and English one, and then assume everyone has that one. But every single country in Europe has a wildly different healthcare system. Even between the Nordic countries there are massive differences, which is why I'm not gonna get very deeply into it today. If you want to see a good video about this phenomenon, a YouTuber called Crowd made one. I will leave a link to that video in the description. So now you've seen that both Bernie Sanders and Ben Shapiro misrepresent the Nordic countries, you can see again that Ben Shapiro believes the lies Bernie Sanders says, which causes major problems, because I personally do think that the US can look at the Nordic countries as an example on how to do things, for instance healthcare. And on a wider scale, I do think Ben and a lot of conservatives would actually be amicable to a version of universal healthcare, but this conversation never even gets started because Bernie lies about how these Nordic countries actually work and then Ben believes them, which then ends up in a political debate where both sides just kind of dunk on each other for being stupid and immoral instead of actually solving any problems. And then my last example is how Joe Rogan believes Joe Biden's lies when it comes to Ukraine. As we all know, Russia invaded Ukraine, and anyone with some brain functioning thinks that this is bad and Ukraine should be able to be free. So because of this, the US government under Biden started putting shit tons of money aside to give to Ukraine. The US supports the Ukrainians so hard that Ukraine is now winning the war. Joe Rogan, who already has a history of not liking Biden, all because he's not always completely coherent.
She used to be 3 years younger than me. Now she's 23 years younger. There was not a single solitary Biden man that is younger than any Biden woman.
I mean, who needs a president to be coherent? We haven't had one of those since 2017. I would even argue since 2001. I don't really like Bush or Obama. But on with the video. Seeing as Rogan obviously doesn't like Biden and is already anti-American intervention, as he always talks shit about it, I made a video about that, link in the description, he therefore doesn't support Ukraine, or is at least skeptical about supporting Ukraine. So how is Joe Biden lying? Well, first of all, a large amount of the funding given by the US to Ukraine is in the form of out-of-date US military equipment. About $21.9 billion of the $75 billion of aid given to Ukraine by the US is in the form of out-of-date military equipment that would have cost more to destroy than to send to Ukraine. So in a way, Ukraine is actually doing the US taxpayer a favor. Now, Joe Biden doesn't exactly want you to know this because he wants to be seen as the ultimate savior of Ukraine, who will spare no expense to protect freedom, and not to be seen as the guy who quickly offloaded some out-of-date junk. But not just Joe Biden. All people on all sides of this issue don't want you to know about this fact. Ukraine doesn't want you to know because it doesn't want to piss off the USA, and Russia doesn't want you to know about this because that would mean it is getting its ass kicked by America's out-of-date junk. and it would make a bunch of gullible American right-wingers a lot less angry with Biden. Then there's also the fact that most of this aid is part of the Lend-Lease Act. The important word here being lend. Yes, this is a loan. Eventually Ukraine will have to pay this back. A little bit like how a lot of the aid given to the Europeans during World War II was also in the form of debt, which the UK, for instance, only finished paying off in 2006. None of this is free, but again, nobody wants to talk about that because Joe Biden doesn't want to be seen as greedy, Ukraine doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds it, and Russia doesn't want people like Joe Rogan who whine and complain about too much money going to Ukraine.
There was a long period where everybody knew that there should be something done to clean up the places that got hit by the riots, to deal with some of the homeless encampments. There should be a way where reasonable people can come to some solution. We need funding to fix these things.
Yeah.
But the fact they just all of a sudden have trillions of dollars for this.
To realize that all of this is credit, because then they might actually do the moral thing and start supporting Ukraine. So this was your boy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, on believing the lies of the opposition. I hope you enjoyed the video and I adequately explained my point. If you have any feedback, I would love to read it in the comments of this video. Thank you for watching. See you later.